Kia ora koutou katoa. Well, I've got a great guest today and we're going to be talking about a number of topics in relation to our rangatahi. We've all got whānau and we know that their future is really important. And whether we're a grandparent or a parent, the way in which we raise our children requires a certain set of skills, but we don't have a playbook, right? So I have invited my guest, Caroline Samson, to come in and have a kōrero today. So kia ora, Caroline. Thank you for meeting with me today and having a bit of a talk about our rangatahi.
Sure.
And be cool if you could just kind of give us a sense of the things that you do in relation to rangatahi.
Cool, kia ora. So basically, I'm based in a school, but my experiences has been working with rangatahi at a iwi level and also just in a community level, as I engage. Why teenagers? Well, I've got 7 children that I had to raise. Yeah. And then they became teenagers. And believe you me, I was looking for help. I was reaching out into my community to see what was available for my kids and me in terms of making sure that they had the support they needed. Particularly interesting was that my kids were, all your kids are different. And so meeting those individual needs, was also a challenge. Yes, they are similar, but they're also different and had different needs and wants at times. My passion about rangatahi actually began with the tribe because I had the privilege of running a mentoring program.
Oh. What were you doing in the mentoring program?
Yeah, right. So believe it or not, I was working first at Nanaiore High School. I was a truancy officer. I'd just been made redundant from New Zealand Post. And so I was looking for a change.
Yep.
And every day I'd write. I was also a postie at one stage. And sometimes I'd see the kids wagging, hiding under the bridges. And I thought, gee, fellas, So I'd stop and say, hello. And they go, oh, they're trying to hide. But, I kind of knew them, the mokopuna faces, you understand. And I thought, gee, I wonder why these kids, And I used to giggle because it also gave me, a memory of, I guess that was us too at some stages in our life. So that began when I got into truancy. It opened up a world where I got to witness again the same experiences I had as a teenager. And I thought, gee, something wrong here. Things haven't changed here. So again, knew that I knew what the kids were going to experience, I guess. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And you would have come into contact with the kids and their parents as a truancy officer.
Yes.
And so kind of, sometimes, parents didn't have a very good experience at school. And how did you kind of encourage the parents to kind of get their kids back on track and back into school?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when you grow up in the village, you actually know your strengths. You see these families, these parents operating on our marae, and you know the abundance in terms of those spaces as they work. Because we come from a inheritance that encourages us always to work for what we want. I knew that was intrinsic in every one of all the parents. It's kind of finding a way to get them to value that.
Well, did you ever get a time when, a parent wouldn't open the door and let you in to have a kōrero about their tamariki?
Absolutely. Or I'd get the, kas, you kick them in the butt, or, I give you permission, kas, slap the ear, and, oh, no, kas, kas, that's not my role, eh? But it took a while. It took a while for them to understand, to work with me in terms of, how do we lift or how do we encourage our kids to stay at school? And, again, our poor parents had those frameworks, like you said. School didn't work for them, so why, cousin, should I encourage my kids, So, again, when I'm working in that space, when I was working in that space, these are all my relatives. These are all my whānau.
Yeah.
So, it took a while.
Yep.
And through that work, it was Paula and Tipper. We're in the tribe, came and approached. Oh, actually, they approached Barbara Kavanagh. the principal of Nanaiore High School.
Right.
And they asked her in the conversation, because they were recruiting for their leadership programs. And they asked Barbara, do you know of anybody who'd like to run a mentoring program? Blah, blah, blah. And she said, actually, I do. She's only part-time here. And, Barbara said that. I think she mentioned me. Would love an opportunity because, she's so passionate. So Tipper come to see me. She rang me and she said, oh. So I had a meeting with Tipper and Paul and voila.
And so what were the essential ingredients that you thought needed to be in a mentoring program to be successful?
Yeah. Most essential thing was that they had to be our own, from our village, the mentors I'm talking about. The people that that surrounded these kids there was a lot in our communities who were already very successful now with our teenagers. So it was looking towards those strengths. So, you look at areas in every whānau, there's a mover and a shaker, yeah?
Yep.
And then when they're working in organisations, there's a mover and a shaker.
Yep.
So what I did was just watch that. I said, oh, gee, I wonder who could influence, this program. So it was successful. That program lasted for 16 years. It was funded for full 16 years. And I believe it was funded because our whānau and our villages, and our community stepped up. And they were welcoming in the new mātauranga too. They wanted to learn too.
What did you learn about the kids in the program?
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this off.
Cool.
Yeah. So it teaches you a lot about people, mentoring.
Yes, it does.
You have to engage with people. You have to, engage with young people and adults. You have to negotiate, I guess, with any partners in the program. But what did you learn about the young people?
Cool. What I learned about the young people was that they were still caring, if you like. They still spoke. They still had the doubts. They didn't value
themselves.
They didn't recognise that being part of our village, because our village is unique. Our villages, because we have the kingitanga framework. So those poor babies were sitting in their framework, not recognising that they were the kingitanga too, and that they were valued. So value more than anything, self-worth. Self-worth. So a lot of the kids, they didn't believe in themselves, right? And so that was what we were dealing with. We were dealing with intergenerational trauma of no self-belief.
So how do you speak with rangatahi in a way that, we all know, we all got young people in our whānau, they don't like to be told, but what are some strategies for parents, aunties and uncles to speak? How do they speak with young people? Cool. If these are some of the things that, they're thinking about self-worth, value, that kind of negative voice that might be there.
Yeah. To be honest with you, 3 years into the project, we had to sit down because the feedback came from the mentors. They said to me, Fire, no matter how much we tell them they matter, or even that we love them and they're loved, unless they believe that in themselves and they think that themselves, we're pushing, and they said, we're pushing uphill. So we, in that wānanga, we decided, okay, what do we need? What do we need in order to flip that thinking? And so in that wānanga, we decided as a team to go out and look for some resourcing and look for what can we flip. 2 weeks later, one of the mentors rang and she says, come to the Wintec. I think this is what we need. And I know what this guy's doing, but it's pretty powerful. So, yeah, cool. Went up to the Wintec and watched the facilitation. And when I left, I knew something had changed in me. Right? So that's what because, the parents and even us, we were all parents, all right? The mentors were actually parents too. And they had the same issues, I said, my boy's got all the potential in the world and we know it, but he doesn't, hey? And it's a struggle to get him to see it. So everybody had a similar story in our mentoring team. So that's why we went out and searched for the tool. And we found a gentleman, his name was Colin Cox. And he was presenting. So anyway, I sort of thought, this must be it. So engaged with him again and did his 3-day leadership program. It's called Self-Leadership Program. And it was through that training I knew, I think this is the tool.
Right. And what was it about the tool?
Cool. The tool was all about understanding that the conditioning. We've been conditioned to think that way.
Can you just break down what conditioning is?
Yeah, cool.
So that, you know, if we were sitting around the table at the marae, say, oh, Cas, you know, you've been conditioned. How would you explain conditioning to our cousins?
Yeah. So to our cousins, we would say that, you know, those things that you believe, that you naturally understand and believe. And the conditioning really comes from an education system that assimilates us. The conditioning comes because we've all been through a process. I don't know how many generations for you, love, but we've all been
I'm not too far apart from you.
An education system,
Yeah.
that never acknowledged, us as whole brain learners. That's from Auntie Rose Betty. We're whole brain learners. So we were sitting in spaces being educated by part. We were only given bits of education where, you know, our brains, our worlds, we were holistic. Why? Because we were connected to the taio.
Can I just walk you back a bit to if the conditioning is about so you're saying that conditioning is teaching us something that's not really natural to us. Is that?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And then, so what would that look like if we were looking at ourselves and our behaviours and our interactions with our kids? What's a conditioned behaviour rather than one that will help our kids to grow?
Cool. So one of the common conditions is when we tell our kids they need to learn the Pākehā ways,
right,
in order to survive in this world. That belief, there was it was quite strong in the parenting of us all because of the conditioning. What does it look like? Well, you know, we make sure they have everything they need to be in education, and they start to look like this, you know. They start to look like our colonisers.
Yeah, well, there was a time, in our parents, maybe their generation, where they were told, oh, don't learn Māori, you're not going to earn a living from it. But yet now we've got kohanga reo, kura, whare kura. We're wanting our kids to learn their reo, be confident in their identity. And we're trying to, I guess, deprogram.
Yes.
Is that what you call it, deprogram?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a deprogramming required for us. So, you know, the fact that we were constantly educated that to be of worth meant you had to have good education, right? There was also a benchmark. It was called university. Yeah. So that started to change for us, It was university, higher education. And whilst that's okay, for a lot of our people, it wasn't necessary.
So, you know, this self-leadership program, when you learnt about conditioning, what was the strategy to unpick or deprogram from that conditioned state?
Cool. First thing you had to do was you had to apply it to yourself. You know, you had to recognise within yourself what was your conditioning. Yeah? That's the first step. Self-leadership was actually about you making changes. You making changes for yourself first. And if you want change out there, you need to see it from the inside out, not the outside in. So that's the first thing. Was you check in your own self-belief systems and values first.
But, you know, if I think about today, we've got so many young parents.
Yes.
So, I mean, this kōrero really flies over the top of heads, perhaps, because that whole looking inside and all of that and unpacking, are our young parents actually able to do that? I might be making a judgment now, I could be all wrong on it. But, you know, it's difficult enough for older parents to do that. So how are we going to navigate those spaces?
Cool. Actually, young parents grab this.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What makes it different for young parents?
Probably because they're closer to it than we were. They're closer to the reality of what's happened. They've also been through their own process of education didn't work for me, or there were things in their education experiences that, you know, made them feel less than self. So the young parents are actually the easiest to work with. As long as you gave them the information, they would make that decision. But a lot of the parents that I actually worked with and who actually got involved with the young parents.
So they didn't have a fixed mindset. They had an adaptable mindset.
Kia ora to that one.
Yeah.
Kia ora to that one. Yeah, and they were looking. It's funny because the younger parents were looking for something better because they knew it wasn't working for them. They had models of tuakana, aunties, uncles, nans, that also it didn't work for them. So they were looking constantly for, I know this is, they had, they were in a position where they felt mainly, I know what it felt like to be not, to feel no self-worth or no self-belief. They had that.
So self-leadership was about looking at conditioning, deprogramming, learning strategies.
Yes.
And what were some of the other elements that you think worked for our whānau?
Cool. One of the things self-leadership did was allow them to be wairua.
Don't you think we do that anyway? Being Māori and all. Are we doing that enough?
No. No. I'm going to be honest with you. Most Indigenous cultures who have been colonised, that's the first thing that they lose. And so it gave self-leadership gives the individual the opportunity to understand we're holistic. So I'm going to lean into models of success like Tā Mason. Yeah, he created the whare tapawha because he understood, because that model in itself was enabling to help whānau understand which areas in their lives they needed to look after or develop better. Yeah. So, the self-leadership gave us the ability to look at all the success models already within us, within our iwi, instead of looking at them as, I don't know, struggles, weapons or tools for struggle, they were tools for ora, So there's another flip that had to happen, because what happened was that the impact was our karakias weren't being valued. The kids, I hope they do the short version today.
Yeah.
Well, that, eh?
Yeah.
So all that languaging. Oh my God, they're going to run the whole one today. Blah blah. That kind of languaging was happening in Moko. So it was understanding that there's the conditioning. We don't even value.
So is there a way, if you have young people in your circle or in your whānau who are kind of connected to wairua, are there strategies for parents to be able to tiaki that, to look after that?
Yes,
because you don't get taught unless you're in a whānau who really appreciates that. I think some whānau might think that this is odd themselves or put it down to a condition. And maybe that's the conditioning you're talking about.
Yes, that's the conditioning I'm talking about.
So is there a strategy for parents to be able to tiaki that taonga in their whānau?
Sure, there is. There is. And I think, that it's the language, changing the way we think about those things. Help families understand that they've been already given the gifts. These are gifts. So in the practice, when we're working with an individual, particularly a mokopuna or, a young person, we know whose shoulders they stand on. We know who surrounds them. So as facilitators, we knew what we were working with. Yeah. So it's transferring all that information to the parents, and getting them to understand you've come from rangatira stock. We've come from a tupuna that was already navigating the world, was already abundant in trade. Those are the things that we've forgotten. An example, I've worked with a lot of whānau who forgot that their tupuna were that abundant. That's all. And one situation I worked with was with Ngāti Haua. And they just needed to be reminded of their rangatira.
If you were going to break self-leadership down to some key concepts, what would that look like?
Cool. The first one is the key concept really is about love. It's love and nurturing that we are part of the big picture. You know, for every tree, there's us. For every mountain, you know, it's kind of like that. That's one of the key concepts is you recognizing that you're actually part of the great picture.
Everything's connected.
Everything's connected. Everything. The other thing is, self-leadership also teaches us to love yourself is to love your whakapapa. It's to reinforce. It's to reinforce that your tupuna got it right, and that they've always had it, you know, right for you. But that's another conditioning. Okay. Duality. We've been conditioned to think duality. And duality means that you think that you have to be this in order to receive that. When really we're kotahitanga. Yeah. We know what the oneness is. We feel the oneness. But our conditioning has taught us to separate that. That's why we kind of operate only in our, what's that state, I guess? We're constantly in our kiko-ness. You know what I mean?
Our physical.
Physical. We're constantly in the physical, eh? And part of things, you know, in life is balance. You require balance. So that's why our tupuna already had the structures, the systems to enable to make sure that when we were in our kiko-ness and we were mahi, that we could retract, withdraw, go back into ourselves and be with our wairua selves, our wairua energy to replenish.
So we've got connectedness, whakapapa. Is there anything else in breaking down self-leadership and the stages or the things that need to be worked through?
Those are the two main ones.
They're the two main ones.
Connectedness, because most of our issues for our people is because we're disconnected from our sources, you know, our puna. You know, these are kind of like a conditioning where we don't realise that actually all we have to do is close our eyes. All we have to do is ask tupuna and they're there. So
fast forward, what are you doing now?
Cool. I'm based in a college now, in a high school, Te Kōpuku High, and in that space we developed a pauora program. Pauora program. And the difference we provide from the norm, which is counselling. So just so people understand, the type of work or the training I've had, my background is in neurosemantics, neurolinguistics programming. And that's just science for basically connectedness and understanding how languaging, how we speak to each other, speak to ourselves can become sometimes different. You know, what you say to yourself and in terms of what you act out here doesn't align. So neurosemantics and NLP were great tools to help us reground and just be.
We're going to hold on that. And we're going to come back after a small break, and we're going to take the next session into, I'll call it a role play in coaching, but more a tool for parents in terms of unpacking or being able to interact really positively with our rangatahi. Thanks a lot, Caroline. So stay with us, because that's going to be a part of our next session, and we really want to ensure that parents have the tools available to them or know where to access the tools in order to help our young people be strong, resilient, confident in who they are, and prosperous, productive, resourceful. Those are the things that we're hoping to achieve out of this podcast. Kia ora whānau.